What happens when an NFL owner gets tired of watching mediocrity and takes matters into his own hands? What we're witnessing in Cleveland right now isn't just another quarterback change. This is a full-blown power play that's been brewing behind closed doors, and the truth is finally coming out. NFL insider Ian Rappaport just dropped a bombshell that's sending shockwaves through the league, confirming what many have suspected all along. Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam demanded to see Shedeur Sanders play, and he wasn't taking no for an answer. The question everyone's asking now is simple. How did we get here, and what does this mean for the future of the Cleveland Browns? Buckle up, because this story goes deeper than anyone realized, and what's happening in Cleveland could change the entire landscape of the NFL. Let's rewind and set the stage. Just yesterday, Browns general manager Andrew Berry and the front office made what appeared to be a routine announcement. Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, named Shedeur Sanders as the starting quarterback moving forward, beginning with their upcoming game against the San Francisco 49ers. On the surface, this looked like a logical decision based on performance. Dillon Gabriel had been struggling, the offense looked stagnant, and something needed to change. But here's where the story gets interesting. According to multiple Cleveland insiders and media members who have sources deep within the organization, this wasn't a football decision made in the film room by coaches analyzing tape. This was a directive that came from the top, straight from owner Jimmy Haslam himself. Think about what that means for a moment. An NFL owner stepping in and essentially demanding that his coaching staff play a specific player isn't just unusual, it's practically unheard of in the modern NFL. Sure, owners have influence and they make their preferences known, but directly intervening in game day personnel decisions, that's crossing a line that most owners are careful to avoid. But Jimmy Haslam isn't most owners, and the Cleveland Browns aren't in a position where they can afford to play it safe anymore. Haslam has watched his franchise flounder for years, cycling through quarterbacks like most people change their socks. He's invested millions, hired and fired coaches, and sat through countless losing seasons. When he drafted Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, it raised eyebrows across the league. Everyone knew Sanders was a first-round talent. Everyone saw what he did at Colorado. The question wasn't about his arm strength, his accuracy, or his football IQ. The whispers were about off-field concerns, interview red flags, and whether he had the right attitude for the NFL. But here's the thing about talent. It doesn't lie. You can question a player's personality all you want, but when they step between those white lines, the tape doesn't care about interview techniques or whether someone wore headphones during a pre-draft meeting. The tape shows everything, and what the tape showed about Shedeur Sanders was that he was being criminally underutilized in Cleveland. When Dillon Gabriel went down a few weeks ago with concussion protocol, it opened a window of opportunity. Gabriel had been given every chance to prove he deserved to be the franchise quarterback. He got the first-team reps in practice. He got the starts. He got the benefit of the doubt from the coaching staff. And what did Cleveland get in return? An offense that couldn't move the ball down the field. An offense that relied on checkdowns, bubble screens, and safe throws that went nowhere. An offense that looked scared to take chances and scared to let their quarterback actually play quarterback. Let's be brutally honest about what everyone witnessed with Dillon Gabriel. This isn't about bashing a player or kicking someone when they're down. This is about objective reality. Gabriel struggled to push the ball downfield. He struggled with anticipation throws. He struggled with reading defenses pre-snap. There were moments where receivers were running wide open down the field, and the ball never left his hand because he was already locked onto his checkdown option. That's not NFL quarterback play. That's game management at best, and Cleveland wasn't in a position where they could afford to just manage games. They needed someone who could create plays, who could extend drives, who could look at a defense and carve it up with precision and confidence. Enter Shedeur Sanders. When he finally got his shot against Baltimore, the circumstances were less than ideal. He was thrown into a pressure cooker situation without adequate preparation, without the full support of first-team reps all week, and without the offense being designed around his strengths. It was rough, and nobody's pretending otherwise. But then came last week, and everything changed. Given a full week of preparation, given the keys to the offense, given the opportunity to show what he could do with proper support, Sanders delivered. He didn't just deliver, he dominated. The Browns won convincingly, and Sanders made throws that Dillon Gabriel simply couldn't make. Deep balls with touch and accuracy, throws into tight windows that required confidence and anticipation. Reads at the line of scrimmage that showed he understood defensive concepts at a high level. Now, here's where Ian Rappaport's report becomes absolutely fascinating. Rappaport went on record saying that playing Shedeur Sanders was always the plan, that from owner Jimmy Haslam all the way down to Kevin Stefanski, everyone was invested in Sanders and wanted to see what they had at the quarterback position. But let's pump the brakes on that narrative for a second. If Sanders was always the plan, why wasn't he getting first-team reps? If Sanders was always the plan, why did Dillon Gabriel start the season as the unquestioned starter? If Sanders was always the plan, why did it take an injury and mounting pressure from fans and media for him to finally see the field? The answer is simple. It wasn't always the plan. What changed was Jimmy Haslam's patience ran out. Multiple sources within the Cleveland organization have indicated that Haslam was pushing for Sanders to play much earlier in the season. He'd watched the tape from Colorado. He'd seen what Sanders could do against top-level college competition. He knew that the kid they drafted in the 5th round was an absolute steal, and he was growing increasingly frustrated watching him rot on the bench while the offense sputtered under Gabriel. But NFL organizations have hierarchies, and even owners typically defer to their football people on game day decisions. Haslam gave his coaching staff and general manager the rope to make their decisions, but when the losses started piling up and the offense looked completely inept, he decided enough was enough. According to insiders, Haslam made it crystal clear that he wanted to see Shedeur Sanders play, and he wanted to see it happen sooner rather than later. This wasn't a suggestion. This was a mandate. What makes this situation so explosive is the precedent it sets. Cleveland's coaching staff essentially had their hand forced by ownership, and now everyone's watching to see what happens next. If Sanders continues to play well and the Browns start racking up wins, Haslam looks like a genius who trusted his gut when his football people couldn't see what was right in front of them. But if Sanders struggles, if the offense regresses, if things go sideways, then Haslam has undermined his entire football operation and proven that he's still the meddling owner who can't help himself from interfering. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Shedeur Sanders' draft slide. Everyone in football circles knows that Sanders had first-round talent. Mel Kiper had him rated as one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. His college tape was exceptional. His numbers at Colorado were outstanding. So why did he fall all the way to the 5th round? The rumors have been swirling since draft day. Former Giants head coach Brian Daboll allegedly made comments about Sanders' interview process, suggesting there were concerns about his professionalism and approach. There were whispers about him wearing headphones during meetings, about attitude issues, about being coachable. Are any of these things definitively true? Nobody outside of team interview rooms can say for certain. But what we do know is that NFL teams talk to each other, and when concerns start circulating about a player, whether they're justified or not, it creates a snowball effect. Here's the reality. Shedeur Sanders fell in the draft because of perceived character concerns, not because of his ability to play football. And that's exactly the kind of situation where a smart organization can find incredible value. Cleveland rolled the dice on a 5th-round pick, knowing they were getting a player with first-round talent who had something to prove. They got a kid who grew up around football royalty, who learned the game from his father, Deion Sanders, who played under intense scrutiny at Colorado and thrived. They got a quarterback who doesn't blink under pressure, who has unshakable confidence, and who believes he belongs among the elite players in the NFL. That's not arrogance. That's the mindset every franchise quarterback needs to have. Now let's address something that's becoming increasingly clear as this situation unfolds: There's a growing sentiment among Cleveland fans and media that maybe, just maybe, Shedeur Sanders should stay in Cleveland and build his legacy there. Think about what that would mean. Cleveland is a franchise that's been searching for a quarterback for decades. They've been the punchline of NFL jokes for years. They've cycled through more quarterbacks than anyone cares to count. The Browns don't have a recent history of success for Sanders to live up to. He wouldn't be following in the footsteps of a legendary quarterback or trying to fill shoes that are too big. This would be his legacy, built from the ground up in a city that's desperate for a hero. Compare that to some other situations around the league. If Sanders had gone to a team with an established quarterback legacy, he'd always be compared to whoever came before. He'd be measured against impossible standards and judged for not living up to history. But in Cleveland? Cleveland is a blank canvas. It's an opportunity to be the guy who turned the entire franchise around. Imagine Shedeur Sanders leading the Browns to their first playoff victory in decades. Imagine him bringing a Super Bowl to Cleveland. The statue outside the stadium wouldn't be a joke. It would be inevitable. The legacy wouldn't be about living up to someone else's greatness. It would be about creating something entirely new. But here's the catch. For that to happen, things need to change in Cleveland's front office. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have done some good things for this organization, but their handling of the quarterback situation has been questionable at best. If Sanders is going to reach his full potential in Cleveland, he needs to be in an environment where the coaching staff believes in him unconditionally, where the offense is designed around his strengths, and where he's given every possible resource to succeed. If the current regime can't provide that, then changes need to be made. Jimmy Haslam forcing Sanders into the starting lineup might be just the first domino to fall. Looking at Cleveland's remaining schedule, there's real reason for optimism. The 49ers game is absolutely winnable. San Francisco's defense doesn't blitz excessively, which plays into Sanders' strengths as a quarterback who can read defenses and find the open receiver. The matchup against Miami and Cam Ward adds an extra layer of intrigue. There's legitimate tension there, a history from their college days that adds fuel to the competitive fire. Sanders went toe-to-toe with Ward when they were college quarterbacks, and neither has forgotten. The game against the Chargers and Caleb Williams is another get-back opportunity. Anyone who followed college football knows the history between Colorado and USC, knows the battles that Sanders and Williams had on the field. That's a game that Sanders is going to have circled on his calendar. The Bengals game at the end of the season represents another opportunity for redemption. Cleveland has struggled against Cincinnati in recent years, and there's a genuine desire for payback within that locker room. If Sanders can lead the Browns to victory in that game, proving he can win meaningful divisional matchups, it would go a long way toward cementing his status as the franchise quarterback. Realistically, looking at the remaining schedule, 4 wins is absolutely achievable. A 4-2 finish to the season would dramatically change the narrative around Cleveland and around Shedeur Sanders. It would make the conversation about whether he should be the starter a complete non-issue. Let's address the elephant in the room that Ian Rappaport tried to dance around in his report. He's now claiming that the plan was always to play Shedeur Sanders, that everyone from ownership down to the coaching staff was invested in seeing what they had at quarterback. But that narrative doesn't match the reality of what we all witnessed. Sanders wasn't getting first-team reps in practice. He wasn't being groomed as the starter. The coaching staff was all in on Dillon Gabriel until circumstances forced their hand. What Rappaport is doing, whether intentionally or not, is helping Cleveland's front office save face. They're trying to rewrite history, to make it seem like this was all part of some master plan when the truth is much messier. Jimmy Haslam forced this issue. Jimmy Haslam looked at his struggling offense and his talented fifth-round quarterback sitting on the bench, and he made a decision that his football people were reluctant to make. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes organizations need someone with the authority and willingness to make tough calls, to override conventional thinking, and take a chance on something different. Haslam saw what many fans and analysts saw, that Shedeur Sanders gave Cleveland the best chance to win, and he wasn't willing to waste another season finding out the hard way. The comparison to Kansas City Chiefs that keeps getting thrown around isn't as crazy as it might sound. Obviously, Sanders isn't Patrick Mahomes, and Cleveland isn't a well-oiled machine like Kansas City. But the principle remains: one dynamic quarterback can transform an entire franchise. The Chiefs were a good team before Mahomes, but they became a dynasty because of him. Cleveland has pieces in place. Their defense is legitimately good, led by Myles Garrett and featuring young, talented players who are making an impact. They've got weapons on offense that have been underutilized. What they've been missing is the quarterback who can tie it all together, who can make the throws that turn field goals into touchdowns and punt returns into scoring drives. Shedeur Sanders has the talent to be that guy. He's got arm strength to make every throw on the field. He's got accuracy to drop the ball exactly where it needs to be. He's got processing speed to read defenses and make quick decisions. He's got mobility to extend plays when protection breaks down. And perhaps most importantly, he's got the swagger and confidence that every great quarterback possesses. He's not intimidated by the moment. He's not afraid to take chances. He believes he's going to succeed, and that belief is contagious. But talent alone isn't enough in the NFL. Sanders needs support around him. He needs an offensive line that can give him time to operate. He needs receivers who can win their one-on-one matchups and make plays downfield. He needs a running game that keeps defenses honest and prevents them from pinning their ears back and rushing the passer every down. He needs play calling that's creative and aggressive, that puts him in position to succeed rather than asking him to overcome bad scheme and poor design. Most importantly, he needs coaching that believes in him completely, that doesn't second-guess decisions or pull back when things get tough. The next few weeks are absolutely critical for Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns. This is his audition for the long-term starting job, his opportunity to prove that he's not just a temporary solution, but the answer to Cleveland's decades-long quarterback question. Every throw will be analyzed. Every decision will be scrutinized. Every win or loss will be used as evidence either for or against him being the franchise quarterback. That's an enormous amount of pressure to put on a rookie quarterback, but if Sanders is going to be great in this league, he needs to show he can handle that pressure. What makes this situation so compelling is the human element. Shedeur Sanders isn't just fighting for a starting job. He's fighting to prove that all the pre-draft concerns were overblown, that the teams who passed on him made a mistake, that he belongs in the conversation with the top quarterbacks from his draft class. Every time he steps on the field, he's showing Cam Ward, Caleb Williams, and every other quarterback taken before him that they're not better than he is. That's powerful motivation, the kind of chip on the shoulder that drives players to greatness. The Cleveland fans deserve credit in all of this too. They've suffered through so many false hopes and failed quarterback experiments that it would be understandable if they were cynical about Sanders. But instead, there's genuine excitement building around him. Fans are showing up, they're buying jerseys, they're believing that maybe, just maybe, this time is different. That kind of energy in a stadium can make a real difference. When a quarterback feels supported by the home crowd, when they know that the entire city is behind them, it creates an environment where success becomes more likely. There's something poetic about a player like Shedeur Sanders potentially finding his home in Cleveland. He grew up as football royalty, the son of one of the most famous athletes in American sports history. He could have coasted on that name recognition, could have taken the easy path, and never had to prove himself. Instead, he chose to forge his own legacy, to step out of his father's shadow and become his own man. Cleveland is the perfect place for that story to unfold. It's a working-class city that appreciates players who grind, who overcome adversity, who prove doubters wrong. The fit makes sense on a level that goes beyond just football. Jimmy Haslam's decision to force the issue and get Sanders on the field might go down as one of the most important decisions in Cleveland Browns history. If Sanders becomes the franchise quarterback that many believe he can be, If he leads Cleveland to sustained success and playoff victories, then Haslam will be vindicated for stepping in when his football people couldn't see the obvious. It's a risky move, one that could blow up in his face if things don't work out. But fortune favors the bold, and Haslam decided to be bold rather than watching his team sleepwalk through another mediocre season. The contrast between Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel couldn't be more stark. Gabriel plays not to lose. He makes the safe throw, takes the easy completion, and hopes that's enough. Sanders plays to win. He's willing to take calculated risks, to trust his arm and his receivers, to make the throw that could result in a touchdown or an interception because he believes in his ability to put the ball exactly where it needs to be. That's the difference between a game manager and a franchise quarterback. The NFL is full of game managers who can run an offense competently, but never elevate it. Franchise quarterbacks are rare, special players who make everyone around them better. Looking ahead to the matchup with San Francisco, this is Sanders' opportunity to make a statement on a big stage. The 49ers are a quality opponent with a strong defense, but they're also dealing with their own issues this season. If Sanders can go into that game and perform well, if he can show poise under pressure and lead Cleveland to a victory, it will silence a lot of remaining doubters. It will prove that his performance last week wasn't a fluke, that he can be consistent week after week. That's what the NFL is all about, consistency. Any quarterback can have one good game. The great ones have good games over and over, even when circumstances aren't perfect. The Browns being fun to watch again is not something anyone expected to say this season. For years, Cleveland games have been exercises in frustration, sloppy football played by underachieving teams that found creative ways to lose. But with Shedeur Sanders under center, there's an energy and excitement that's been missing. Fans are tuning in because they genuinely want to see what happens, not out of obligation but out of hope. That's a remarkable transformation in just a few short weeks, and it speaks to the impact that one dynamic player can have on an entire organization. The quarterback controversy that some media members are worried about is a non-issue if Sanders continues to play well. Dillon Gabriel seems like a good person and a capable backup, but this league isn't about being nice or capable. It's about winning, and right now, Sanders gives Cleveland the best chance to win. If he keeps performing, if he keeps making plays and leading the team to victories, there won't be any controversy. The job will be his, and everyone will move forward. Controversies only exist when performance is questionable, when there's legitimate debate about who should be playing. As long as Sanders is clearly the better option, there's no debate to be had. What happens over the next 6 games will determine the trajectory of the Cleveland Browns for years to come. If Sanders proves he's the franchise quarterback, Cleveland can build around him in the offseason. They can invest in offensive weapons, upgrade the offensive line, and create an environment where a young quarterback can thrive long-term. But if there are doubts, if Sanders struggles or shows that he's not ready to be the guy, then Cleveland is back at square one, searching for answers at the most important position in sports. The stakes couldn't be higher. One thing's for certain, Jimmy Haslam isn't willing to wait around and hope things work out. He's seen too many lost seasons, invested too much money, and dealt with too much disappointment to sit back and let things happen organically. He forced this issue because he believed it needed to be forced, because he saw an opportunity that his football people were missing. Whether that makes him a meddling owner or a decisive leader depends entirely on what happens next. Results determine narratives, and right now, the results are trending in Haslam's favor. The transformation happening in Cleveland is bigger than just one player. It's about an organization finally taking a chance, finally being willing to embrace risk instead of playing it safe. For too long, Cleveland has been conservative, careful, afraid to make bold moves because they might blow up. But playing it safe hasn't worked. Being careful hasn't resulted in winning. Sometimes you need to take a swing, to bet on talent, and hope it pays off. Shedeur Sanders is that bet, and Cleveland is all in. So what's next for Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns? More wins, hopefully. More big throws and exciting plays that give fans a reason to believe. More evidence that the fifth-round steal is actually a first-round talent who fell because of nonsense that had nothing to do with playing football. Most importantly, more proof that Jimmy Haslam's decision to demand Sanders play wasn't just owner meddling, but the catalyst for turning around a franchise that's been stuck in neutral for decades. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in this story. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Is Shedeur Sanders the real deal? Can he actually turn Cleveland into a legitimate contender? Should Jimmy Haslam get credit for forcing this change? Or is he setting a dangerous precedent? I want to hear all your thoughts, all your hot takes, all your predictions for what happens next. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Cleveland quarterback situation, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates as this story continues to unfold. The Shedeur Sanders era in Cleveland is just getting started, and trust me, you're going to want to follow every twist and turn. Until next time, shake off those haters and keep believing that better days are ahead.